Welcome, everybody, to episode 274 of WordPress Weekly for Wednesday, May 24th, 2017. I'm your host, Jeff Chandler, joined by the one and only Triple J, J-Trip, John James Jacoby, who, it hasn't been that long since the last time you were on the show, and based on some recent conversations, you may be on some episodes in the near future. But welcome back, sir.
Thank you, friend. Happy to be here. Whatever I can do to help.
Awesome. So today we don't have a guest lined up today. I will say that last week's episode, we did a May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and last week we had Bridget Willard and Ed Finkler on, and we had a really cool conversation, just sort of discussion about mental health, warning signs, how people can help, different programs that are available out there. And I think it was a really cool episode, something we haven't talked too much about here on WordPress Weekly. And some of the feedback we got on that show was pretty good. So I'm happy to oblige and raise awareness of mental health issues. And thank you to those two, again, for being on the show and sharing their expertise in this subject area. Today, we don't have a guest, but we do have some WordPress news to commentate on. Consider this the audio version of the comment forum on the Tavern. So let's start off with our first story, and that is WordPress.com has launched some TV commercials. So there's 5 different commercials. They're being tested in 6 different television markets, and the videos were actually created earlier this year when a volunteer team of automaticians visited Detroit, Michigan, to participate in something that was called the Rebrand Detroit Project. They worked with a gentleman named Haji Flemings, founder of Camp University, and with the help of the team, they launched 9 new sites for small businesses over a 48-hour period. So think of it as a little bit like a hackathon. So the commercials, the longest one is 2 minutes and 30 seconds in length, and it kind of highlights certain businesses in Detroit and how these business owners think of success and the community and what they're doing in the city. And throughout the video, you see a WordPress logo sort of watermark in the bottom left-hand side, and you may see 1 or 2 different WordPress factoids pop up on the screen as things are being discussed. And then at the end, there's the WordPress.com logo where it says websites, blogs, and domains. I've watched the commercials a couple of times, and here's the thing, John. First of all, this is a huge step because WordPress has not done what the other big competitors like Squarespace and Wix have done in terms of marketing. They've really relied on word of mouth advertising and referrals from friends and other users. So this is a big step for them. It's sort of an experiment to see how it does. But an advertisement and a commercial, I expect it to sell something or, raise awareness of something. And then maybe I came in with first of all, I think I realized I'm the wrong market segment, the wrong person that these ads are targeted to. But I didn't really feel anything. I didn't feel intrigued about WordPress.com. I didn't feel like after the commercials, I really wanted to go check out what WordPress.com was all about. In the videos, the commercials, you don't see the business owners actually interacting with and messing around with the tools that are available on WordPress.com.
Sure.
So to me, the commercials confused me. I didn't know what was being sold. I didn't know really the purpose or the selling point of what these commercials were all about. Now, some people in the comments have suggested that that getting up and running fast and the sense of community and the values and raising awareness of WordPress.com, that's what the commercials were all about. But I don't know, the commercials didn't hit the right spot for me.
Yeah. The thing that I find the most interesting about a WordPress commercial or a WordPress.com commercial is specifically for us or listeners of your podcast or readers of the Tavern is, I think you're right that we're not necessarily the target market for those commercials, in that we're so close to the branding and what WordPress is and the sensitivities behind the confusion between .com and .org and all those things, that we're going to look at it with a different lens than what a traditional non-WordPressy in the know sort of inside baseball audience might look at it for. And so in a way, the commercials to me are mostly about brand awareness and not about the features or the selling of what WordPress necessarily is as a product or a thing. And to finish it off, I think if these commercials were too pitchy, if they were too heavy on the pitch, then the response from people like us would have been more negative than puzzled, because we would have said, oh, it's Automatic doing what Automatic does again, which I don't think is a fair assessment in myself. But if it was too heavy on the pitch, I think that would have been the response. So in the spectrum of things that these commercials could have been, this honestly, I think, is probably the best, the classiest way to experiment with a WordPress commercial. I think that they're all pretty great, and they could have been much worse. And I'm excited to see what the next commercials look like. I think they're pretty awesome. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, and a commenter by the name of Isabel said that creative types won't be confused by these commercials, but they'll instead get a vague good feeling that maybe others can relate to, or prompt them to visit WordPress.com, where she believes that the goal for these commercials is to get them to visit WordPress.com, and she thinks that these commercials will be successful with this goal. And she also says that most avid readers are not the target audience for these commercials. Yeah. And I would agree with that. Yeah, I think exactly what you said, and I realized that when I watched the commercials, that I just know too much. I know about this. I know what WordPress.com offers. I know about the customizer and the intricacies and things like that, and to not see any of those in the ads, I'm like, But for somebody who is on the fringes, or maybe they've heard of WordPress.com, but they don't really truly know what it is or what it's capable of, maybe these commercials are right up their alley.
And I guarantee you, someone that has worked on a movie or a video game, when they see the commercial for the thing that they have helped build, or they'll look at the commercial and be critical, like, oh, you picked totally the wrong animation, you picked the crappiest looking villain, or you picked the worst looking scene in the movie for the commercial, and somebody puts it together in a way that doesn't feel like it represents you. It's totally not an unfamiliar thing, where this is just the first time that we get to experience that. I think it's neat. I think it's I don't know. I think it's just going to be cool to see what the iterations are, especially with the .org side of things having a marketing arm now, and people working really hard to try and figure out what WordPress's marketing and strategy looks like in an open sort of way is new. I think this is uncharted territory for the most part. You don't see a Ubuntu commercial. I mean, I guess maybe there are, but I don't see those. You don't see other open source pieces of software having commercials out on television. So this is new. This is neat. I think it's not going to be perfect, and if it was somehow like the best commercial in the world, we'd have nowhere to go but down. And that's scarier than knowing that we have improvements to make and that we'll be able to make them over time.
Well, I mean, just like everything else, WordPress and open source and Automatic, iteration. It's all about iteration, and I can't. I'm pretty interested to see what the next set of commercials are, or the commercial. And something I've thought about when it comes to commercials is, well, if I was Matt Mulliwig and I was hiring an advertising agency to do a 30-second to a minute and a half or 2-minute spot commercial. 2 minutes is that's a pretty long time in video and television. If I wanted to sell WordPress.com, how would I do that? What would I show? How would I do that? And to cram all that stuff in, and for people to just pick up on it and be like, oh yeah, okay, that looks cool, and yeah, I can do that. it's a lot more difficult, to cram all that into video within 2 minutes without deeper explanations of what these things are, what these people are doing, than maybe a lot of people realize.
And there's a lot of directions that a commercial could go. You could go the VIP route of the brand names that people are familiar with. You could go the independent blogger route. Now that WordPress.com starts having plugin support a little bit more, you could go the customization route. You could even go like breaking news when war breaks out somewhere, like the real the real crazy stories where someone is using their WordPress.com blog to have a voice in a country where normally they couldn't. Like there are lots of stories that someone could choose to tell about things that happen that are amazing on WordPress.com or on just in WordPress in general. But you can't jump out of the gate with all of those. You have to ease into this, I think, a little bit. So I think that's what is exciting to see is how people look at like Apple's advertising and the evolution of their commercials, and people are pretty critical of what the I'm a Mac, I'm a PC, and some of the directions that Apple has gone. And we're going to be able to look at WordPress's commercials in a similar way in a couple of years. So I don't know. I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I just think it's nice now to see Mark. I said Mark, but Matt kind of fulfill his word or his pledge that at the WordCamp US State of the Word, he said that they were going to apply more focus and apply more spending dollars to marketing, and this is just sort of the first part of that.
Well, and it's easy to be critical of Automatic and the confusion of .com and .org and everything else, but I think it always comes back to, at least for me, trying to remember how costly that are, having televised commercials and hiring brand management firms to help you with delivering the message in a way that seems appropriate for television, since none of us that I know of have extensive television marketing backgrounds or experience. It's not cheap, and having a company like Automatic with a person like Matt at the helm makes these types of things kind of a pretty generous gift that not everyone else would want to give, and not every company would be as considerate to the .org side of things as Automatic historically has been. It really is a cool setup. I think it's either commercials don't do a bad job of like bringing it up or not bringing it up or making it confusing or not confusing. It's not even a problem. It's just a WordPress related thing, and then WordPress.com gets to be the funnel that brings them in, and I think that's great. I don't know. That's awesome. I think it's really cool.
So folks who are trying to attend WordCamp Europe are facing a bit of difficulty with getting visas. The organizers of WordCamp Europe 2017 published an open letter to Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, regarding attendees that are being denied visas. According to them, visas are being denied because a 40 euro entry fee cannot justify international travel. So how about that? So we talk about the low cost of WordCamps and how beneficial it is and how it opens up the opportunity for so many more people who may not be able to afford typical conference prices of hundreds of dollars. And folks who are traveling internationally are being denied entry into the country or, for visas because the cost of the conference is so low that that's actually a legitimate reason for you being denied or people being denied access to the country. So their goal here was sort of to raise awareness. They're not sure if the open letter will make it to the people at the top, all the way up to the president. But this has happened to previous years at WordCamp Europe. This has happened to other countries as well.
Hmm.
and it's just a sad sort of state of affairs on things. And and some people have suggested, well, why don't we just jack up WordCamp's rates to $150, $200, which is still cheaper than most conferences. And, my thought is, well, you can't do that because that pretty much eradicates, that goes against everything of what the
Right.
WordCamp Foundation and what these WordCamp events stand for. I mean, there's a
Hmm.
whole laundry list of reasons on why they're so affordable. And
Hmm.
that's to try and make them as affordable as possible, so as many people has an opportunity to attend as possible.
Yep.
So they're not looking for any special treatment or not about automatic approval of visas, but they're just kind of just raising it as an
Yep.
issue. And
It's visas have always been an incredibly fuzzy thing, like between work visas, educational visas, which country for how long, getting approval for them, the application process, the interview process. Like for temporary visas, every country I think has different expectations and limitations on whether you're doing it for work or you're doing it like for personal travel. And if you're doing it for work, how much money are you planning on making or being paid, and what's the company, and are they paying you directly? Are they paying a separate company directly? How are you being reimbursed? Da, 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 da. There's a whole set of rules and regulations that countries have set for themselves to try to limit the number of individuals that are coming across their borders for $40, right? Like it's a little crazy to think about, and I think the political climate, the way that things are, makes it feel a lot more scary than maybe the reality of it is. But I remember like most of the times that I've kind of ever traveled abroad, it has always been for like a vacation. It has been for a personal reason. If you ever say, "Well, I'm going to do some work while I'm here," the conversation is a completely different
mhm.
conversation that you end up having. I don't want to be dishonest, but most of the time that I've traveled, it has been to meet up with other people in a relaxed sort of setting. So maybe I'm trying to justify this to myself, but for the most part, uh, it's the for it's not like a traditional visa setup is mostly for the like a work visa type problem that people run into is largely for people that travel internationally for a week or two or 3 or 5 or 6 months at a time, that are there working for a company to do work for someone in a country that they don't live in. And so everyone treats that differently. But if you're just going somewhere for like an event for a week or two to come back home, that is more of a vacation and sightseeing than it is working. And if you happen to be at a WordCamp for 3 days, and you're abroad for another 4 or 7 days, I mean, for me, the 50% rule generally applies. If I'm in this place for more than 50% of the time and not working, if someone asks me what I'm doing there, my answer is going to be, I'm here on vacation. The second it's work, it complicates the whole deal.
Yeah, and one of the other things about the issue with visas is in WordCamps. WordCamps, one of the pillars of this event is uh, to focus on the local community of people who embrace
Hmm.
WordPress. So if maybe if WordCamp Europe or some of the other countries, I don't know. I mean, what if they like focused more on really just being a local event? I mean, I
Hmm.
guess that's one way to kind of not necessarily avoid, but maybe to lessen the issues involved with visas.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's that other aspect of, well, WordCamps are supposed to be local, so why are we having such large events that start
Yeah.
attracting international travelers?
Right. Right.
Then it starts to sound like more of a high tech business, serious type conference, like corporate level
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
That's
It's in,
just something else interesting to ponder.
for big events like flagship events like WordCamp US and WordCamp Europe. They our decision to attend or participate is volunteer largely, like any other WordCamp would be. And we choose whether how committed we are to going to those types of events. And the problem with having them be as local as a traditional WordCamp would be is that those two events specifically, WordCamp Europe and WordCamp US, the FOMO for those two events is super real. Like I've yet to go to a WordCamp Europe, like any of them, and the amount of like decisions that were made or relationships that were forged or planning that was done at WordCamp Europe every single year that I missed out made it really hard to be a part of the things that were happening after WordCamp Europe would occur. Like nothing would happen on IRC, nothing would happen anywhere, and then everyone goes home, and then a week later, there's all this stuff that's going on that you weren't a part of. And so, as a contributor, as someone who's even really trying to be 100% active in the things that are going on, you just miss so much at those two events that it's risky to not go to them and to pay attention to the things that are going on. Every other WordCamp, I think you're right, but these two they're pretty tough as a sort of career WordPress person to not be a part of.
And this year it would be even tougher for you because for the first time, the Community Summit, which is usually part of WordCamp US, is actually going to be held in Europe at WordCamp Europe. So,
yep.
And it's kind of cool to be able to move that from the US to Europe. It opens it up to an entirely new audience. And at least with WordCamp US and Europe being such large events and attracting international travelers, it is pretty cool to have a WordPress event where, it can become a melting pot of different nationalities with the traveling, and really get a chance to meet people from different parts of the world that use WordPress, where you really have a hard time getting them. I mean, you're not going to have, people from Germany or Russia traveling to go to WordCamp East Troy.
Right.
No offense to East Troy.
None taken. But, none taken.
It's a very small local camp. And WordCamp US and Europe, provides those opportunities since there's such large events where it makes sense to have international travelers. So,
and we're such a open and diverse community that really tries actively to be open and diverse and accepting of everybody. And part of that means being open to new people and new places and new experiences. And so it is hard to not want to go to like every worldwide WordCamp that's going on, because it's like a guaranteed great time and with great people. So why would you? It's not even risky. It's like you can go and have a great time and do something that you enjoy. So it doesn't seem weird to want to go, even though our events are traditionally supposed to be about the local WordPress community. It just is so much fun to be a part of all of the individual little communities that why wouldn't you want to go? And you know what? WordCamp East Troy was probably one of the best WordCamps that I had gone to ever, or that I had helped start or whatever else. Like we had 35 attendees and everyone was totally stoked and happy to be there. And we got to hang out really casually and like have a good time. And so if we ever do a WordCamp East Troy again, which everyone has said at some point, every single one of the dozens of attendees that were there have been like, you should totally do a WordCamp East Troy again this year. And I'm like, well, yeah, we probably should, but everyone wants bigger and better. And I kind of want, it to be cozy and I think it's more fun that way.
Yeah, from my experience, I think I mentioned this to others. I've been to WordCamps 400, 500, 600, 700 people, and it's great. It's like a big family reunion. However, you miss out on meeting certain people. It's just the way the weekends go, the events go between sessions and hallway tracks and people leaving and people going. But when I've been to WordCamps where it's between 100 to 200 people, those are cool. I mean, you have a lot more opportunities to talk to people, to meet the people. You're not in such a rush. And it just feels, like you said, a little bit cozier and just more of more of a controlled atmosphere where you're not running around because there's 800 people and you want to say hi to everybody before you leave.
Right. Yep, I agree for sure.
So anybody out there who uses the Storefront theme, there is a major update, 2.2.0, which was released, and this includes a new design. There's been major improvements to the new user experience. So when you install Storefront 2.2.0, which is a WooCommerce theme, there's a new setup and configuration wizard in the customizer, which actually takes advantage of a feature in WordPress 4.7 called starter content. So that's pretty cool. It's one of the first times, first mentions of a theme or a product I've seen using that feature. So if a user is starting with a fresh store, the wizard will automatically import example products, create the home page, set the correct template, assign the full width template to the cart and checkout pages, and remove unnecessary widgets. Now, as part of the design refresh, there's a new homepage hero section, and the previous version had a dark header background. This time it's white, so this actually puts more of the focus on the site logos and the actual products on the page. So this is kind of a back in December, last December, Matt Mullenweg was interviewed and he was asked about the Storefront theme, and he had commented that the theme was due for an update and that there was a lot of potential for improvement, and we're seeing some of that come to light here with Storefront 2.2.0. According to the article that Sarah Gooding wrote on WP Tavern, there's more than 90,000 stores using Storefront as the base for their sites, and there's about there's 8 child themes on WordPress.org theme directory that lists Storefront as the parent theme. And I will say 2.2.0 did have some hiccups. For those who immediately updated, there was an issue where widgets were disappearing both in the sidebar and the footer. There were new pages that were being added to contact and about pages. However, the WooCommerce team was quick to release 2-point releases. So I think they're at 2.2.2 now, and those issues should be addressed. So if you haven't updated yet, if you didn't update to 2.2.0 immediately, in this case, it was probably beneficial for you. But you definitely want to check out the newest and latest release, and pretty cool to see the Storefront theme had this new design, and there you go. Kind of a nice start for the folks who install WooCommerce.
It is super cool. They've always done a really good job with the cohesion between WooCommerce as a plugin and then having a good walkthrough and theme support and all those things. It's one of the things that with the BBs that I've always been a little bit envious of is as a product, WooCommerce is able to push a little bit more, like kind of guide users in a direction to say, activate this thing, or if you want this feature, you can pay for this thing, and it can kind of include a little bit more of the hand holding than I think what BuddyPress and BBPress are really able to do as sort of officially licensed sister projects to WordPress, where like WordPress doesn't have a walkthrough to say, now welcome to your dashboard. Here's all the neat things that you can do, and here's where you go to install a theme and a plugin and da 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 da. Where WooCommerce can really handhold people through it. I think I know the folks at Array Themes also have a pretty slick default data importer that uses the WordPress importer to pull in like default pages and settings for the themes that support like EDD or WooCommerce, whatever else. Theirs is pretty cool, but the thing that is the neatest part about Storefront, at least to me, about what the Storefront theme does and what the folks at Array Themes are doing, particularly with integration in the customizer, which is where I think a lot of this stuff starts to feel like it really does belong, is that this starts to tiptoe towards the idea of WordPress installation profiles that we have at various summits and things talked about would be cool ideas. And so if for plugins like WooCommerce to be able to push that forward in a niche sort of way, lets them learn and glean a lot of insight from how users react to what they try to do that can directly impact the decisions that get made in WordPress for everyone going forward, whether or not to include some type of like, do you want a blog or do you want a website or do you want a shopping cart or social network or forums? Like, to be able to give your WordPress install this profile to say, well, yeah, I'm totally installing WordPress and I want forums right away. So BBPress is what you want. And let's pick a BBPress theme that works really well. And now you turn key and now here's your default ad and everything's wonderful. Like this edges us towards that a little bit closer and slowly, without it requiring a whole lot of discussion in a core WordPress core sort of way or on Slack or anything else. They're just able to deploy it and watch it work and then learn from it and then use that experience later on when the core discussion comes up again. I think Helen Husandi was working on that. There might be a make post somewhere about install profiles, but I haven't heard or read anything about it in a while. So anyone who's curious about the history about install profiles might have to do some digging.
That whole idea of install profiles or forks of WordPress that cater to specific uses of functionality has been discussed pretty much ever since I've gotten involved with WordPress back in 2007, 2008. But it's never really kind of turned into a reality. Just because if you start doing things like forks, well, now you have lots of things to maintain. You have to constantly maintain it as with the core of WordPress. I wanted to, we're talking about onboarding wizards, things like that when people install a plugin or maybe even a theme. And I wanted to run this by you. It reminds me of some stats I mentioned earlier this year. Freemius Insights, which is a pretty cool analytics company by Vova Feldman. He's been collecting mountains of data for plugins, and earlier this year he shared some of the data with me that I posted on the Tavern. And one of the things that he's able to do with his analytics plugin is that plugin authors, if a user deactivates a plugin, there's this prompt that shows up with responses where users can say, provide a reason why they are deactivating the plugin. And out of 114,000 feedback responses on why users deactivated a plugin, 23% expected something else or didn't work as expected. But the one I want to highlight is the second most popular reason: didn't understand how it works, which I thought was kind of fascinating. So when users activate a plugin, and I've actually looked into this, and it's kind of easy to see how this could be. The second most popular response is that when you activate a plugin, you don't know what the next step is because there's no little pop-up. WordPress has a built-in core functionality of what do you call that? It's like a notification, something like that, where it kind of shows you where the settings link is, and the next step is, well, what? Okay, well, where do I go to find the settings? Even that is sometimes a chore because it could be could be a top-level menu item, could be a sub-menu item. You don't know where it's at, and this is kind of where I highlighted. WooCommerce is bucking the trend where, it's a complicated plugin, but they have this onboarding wizard that walks you through. And by the time you're at the ready step, you pretty much have a store where you just need to upload products and start selling things. So, I'm wondering, how different plugins, or if all plugins at some point, how we can buck this trend of, well, okay, you install a plugin, it seems cool, but now what? Now you're stuck.
I'm trying to find someone recently, like within the past month, worked on a.
Oh yeah, I mentioned that. I know what plugin you're talking about.
I don't remember what it was called, and clearly, like trying to search the web for WordPress plugin changes or whatever is going to yield 10 million results that don't matter. So. But I looked at it and it's pretty cool. I mean, it's clear that there's like other things that it could do, and like there's no way for it to really know for sure. But
it's called Show Plugin Menu Items on Activation by Kellen Mace and Gary Kovar of Web Dev Studios.
Thank you very much. Yep, that's exactly what I was talking about. Something like that, right? Like, is a great proof of concept for alleviating the problem. And so anyone that hasn't seen this plugin, all that it really does is Under the scenes, the code is kind of incredibly terrible, which makes it amazing to me because there's really no way to predict what a plugin does. It could do anything to WP admin or to WordPress. So to try and build a system that can be somewhat aware of how the WordPress has changed from one page load to the next is kind of an intricate, messy sort of ordeal. So it's a neat plugin. The code is kind of interesting to watch how they had to hack around and figure out how to even implement an idea like this. But it's one of those plugins that is a really cool stepping stone towards having a somewhat self-aware interface to say, hey, user, something in the platform has changed since the last time you reloaded the page, and here are those things. And look at them if you want to, and if not, dismiss the little pop-up bubble or whatever. It's cool. It's a pretty neat idea.
And speaking of that idea, not too long after we wrote about the article, somebody has suggested creating a new track ticket with a feature suggestion, and that was the feature. And they highlighted the plugin and what it does as a sort of proof of concept of how it could work. And there's been a little bit of discussion on the track ticket, but it's sort of stalled for now. But it's kind of cool and nice that it's at least there.
It was one of those ideas where when we were doing the BuddyPress used to come with an activation wizard, but one, I don't think that we did a great job of making it be super awesome. Like WooCommerce's, I think, is really great. BuddyPress's was never that good. So we ended up kind of just not having the wizard and doing some trickery, and then just giving you the default data on activation if you had a relatively vanilla WordPress install already. But we were going to go through the process of like having tool tips and menus and pop-ups for the new menu items to walk someone through, like, we've made 3 new pages, you should go look at them, and there's this new settings menu down here that you can go look at, and everything else. And at one point, even with BBPress, I had gone through, like, on the activation hook, I wanted to have the BBPress bee, like the bee icon, like fly around and then like land on the new menus and roll them open. Like, hi, look at the new things. Like, I'm cute, I'm a bee. But I couldn't get the CSS rotations to work correctly because it was like 10 years ago when browsers didn't really support it. And so I gave up on the idea and then never really looked back. So like the fact that something like this is achievable now and that there is a real true proof of concept for it is a cute, exciting little addition that could change users' perception on every single plugin that they ever activate without plugin authors having to do very much to support it. It's neat.
Folks, the things you and I learn when Triple J's on this show, let me tell you. It's the first time I've ever heard about the beat story, so that's cool. Speaking of the customizer in WordPress 4.8, there is a change that I think a lot of people out there will appreciate, and that is the customizer sidebar is now going to have a variable width. So right now, or pretty much since the customizer has been in WordPress, we've been stuck with this 300 pixel wide sidebar. Even if you have a very wide screen, the customizer takes up this 300 pixels. And the question has been, well, why? Why can't it take up more space, or why can't the end user be able to manually adjust it? Well, there's been a change in WordPress 4.8 so that the customizer sidebar will actually vary between 300 pixels and 600 pixels wide, depending on the width of the screen. So I use a 21-inch widescreen monitor, and the width of the sidebar on my screen is 345 pixels. So it's not a huge change, but the extra width is noticeable and actually appreciated. I like it, even though it's not that big of a change. WordPress theme and plugin developers who have built custom controls into the customizer are highly encouraged to test WordPress 4.8 to make sure that your controls display properly on a between a 500 and 600 pixel sidebar, because up until now, all the controls were just, that's all you had to worry about was 300 pixels. Now it's variable width, so certain controls may not look right if the sidebar stretches out to 600 pixels. So it's kind of a middle ground. It makes it sort of responsive. You still, as an end user, don't have manual control over how wide it is. However, there is a plugin out there actually a feature plugin called Customize Pane Resizer. Do a search for it on the plugin directory. And what that does is it gives you a little handlebar on the customizer sidebar, and you could drag it to the right and to the left. So you can make it as large or as small as you want. There's also a plugin out there called Fluid Customizer. And one of the customized component maintainers, Weston Reuter, says that the feature plugin, which is the one I just mentioned, the customized pane resizer, it was built as a feature plugin. It was built at the time of around 4.5, where the idea of being able to readjust the size of the customizer, they were working on that. I guess things came up. It didn't manage to get merged into Core. So it's been a few years later, and it's still there. The feature plugin's still there. So there's a chance that it still may one day get merged into WordPress. However, being variable width and responsive is a big improvement over just being stuck with that 300 pixel sidebar, especially if you have so much screen real estate.
Yeah, right. I have a very vague memory of being at one of the WordPress community summits, and I think that Mel Choice was working on the responsive views for the customizer, where you could switch it from like tablet size to phone size to browser size. And she had a draggable, resizable customizer. Like, I can remember the handle being there and her like being like, "Hey, look at this," and like wee woo, like resizing it, me being like, "Oh, that's awesome." But that had to be years ago. And so I think the 600 width is a good compromise and a good test and a good stepping stone to show that like developers are going to have to get used to or accommodate for variable width controls, because you're absolutely right. If a new customizer control, or everyone kind of taps into the customizer with custom radio buttons, or you're using Select 2 or one of the other Listbox JavaScript fun jQuery plugins. If it doesn't resize correctly, then users suffer. So rather than give everyone this fully dynamic problem to solve, where they have to have these like totally fluid controls that could be any size, making it one size at first, it seems like a pretty polite transition to get people used to what it looks like to go from 3 to 6, and eventually you might have to go from 6 to 9, and then eventually you might have to be 3 to 1. Like, to get people used to what those transitions are. This seems like the right way to go about it, I think.
Absolutely. So we have actually two more stories, because I do want to talk about this other story that's actually huge news. I haven't had a chance to talk about it on the show a little bit, but I did want to highlight the 4th annual WordPress Charity Hackathon that's going on July 15th down in Cape Town, South Africa, and it's being organized by Hugh Lashbrook. And it's the 4th annual. It's kind of cool. It's a Do Action WordPress Charity Hackathon. And the objective of the event is to build websites for 10 different nonprofit organizations in one day. So it's kind of neat, sort of like some of the hackathons we do here in the US for different nonprofits and stuff. People get together, different marketing, design, development backgrounds, and you somehow come together, collaborate, and create this beautiful garden of a website. How about that analogy?
These things are super fun. I've done these a few times. My favorite was I did one in Minnesota, was where I had met Jim and Allison Barrett before Allison worked at Automatic, and it was crazy. It was a 24-hour code challenge, locked in. Everyone's locked into a building for a day, and you meet a nonprofit, you build them a website, you go through the whole spiel with them, and there's different approaches and different ways that these events can go, but they are always a ton of fun, and everyone is so appreciative and happy to be involved and get something out of it at the end, and it was just cool. They're really cool events.
Hey, I don't mind contributing and sharing my knowledge and being part of the action, but hey, pizza and Mountain Dew, I'm there. I'll share everything you want to know. You give me some Mountain Dew and pizza. So Hugh
Caffeine
Lashbrook,
is a requirement for those events. You're usually up all night, and you end up sleeping under a table for an hour to try and recuperate some energy. But yeah, there's Mountain Dew is a requirement.
so Lashbrook has said that they've actually acquired a new venue, which is actually more accommodating to this type of collaboration and meeting space. It's called Workshop 17. They're hosting, looks like they're going to host about 70 participants. So there's going to be 7 people per team. The event is currently half full. They're still recruiting another 35 participants. And they have a list of some pretty cool organizations that are going to be taking advantage of these skills. And what they've been able to do is sort of bringing the Do Action Charity Hackathon events under the official WordPress community program. So Hugh Lashbrook has kind of been organizing these things and trying to get a template together so that they're easily reproducible, so that other potential event organizers can create something similar while also getting, some of maybe the financial or sponsorship benefits of being under the WordCamp WordPress umbrella. So that's pretty cool there. Pretty cool. Sort of start that thing and try and kind of go in with the mindset of, hey, we're going to try and create a template here, and so others can do it as well under the WordCamp umbrella. So it could be in the future that we're not just having WordCamps here in the U.S., but we're having hackathons with WordCamp support. That would be pretty cool.
It is super cool. Looking at their at doaction.org, they've got more than Cape Town happening too. Look at that. Pretoria, Montreal, Beirut. They're branching out. That's sweet. That's cool. Good job, y'all. Awesome. That's awesome.
And one of the last things I wanted to talk about on today's show is that WordPress.com is experimenting with allowing business plan customers to install third-party plugins and themes. Yes, you heard that right. WordPress.com allowing people to install plugins and themes in the same sentence. Now, that's been one of the things, it's been one of the most important things that have distinguished self-hosted WordPress from WordPress.com is the ability to install custom things and plugins. So WordPress.com has this sort of free plan. Then there's self-hosted WordPress, and then they have this plan in the middle called the WordPress.com business plan, where you can get things like SEO tools, WordPress, all that kind of cool, crazy paid-for features, and Jetpack. But it's kind of interesting now that they're sort of allowing people to experiment with this plan, where you can install like a WooCommerce. And now you're running WordPress.com, but you can run WooCommerce. And it's not, WooCommerce isn't a service, but you're actually using it as a plugin, as if you're on some shared hosting account or a web hosting account.
Yep.
So this is huge. This is huge news. I have no idea if it's on the same platform as regular WordPress.com, if it's on a different infrastructure. The details of this haven't really come out, but that'll be interesting to find out at some point in the future. I know Mark Armstrong, who's a representative of Automatic, he says that they're still in the experimentation phase, and it's something they've rolled out to business plan customers, and they're just trying to see how it works and how things are rolling out. But if this ends up becoming a thing, like it sticks around as a feature, it would place WordPress.com squarely in the middle of the whole managed WordPress hosting space. And then it becomes, first of all the people out there, all the people doing business on WordPress who sell themes and plugins can now remove the page that says, this cannot be run on WordPress.com, which everybody has, because there's so much confusion. And then that's the other thing. How does this move, or how could this move affect the already existing confusion between WordPress.com and self-hosted WordPress? I mean, now it becomes, well, what really is the difference, or what are the differences?
I can tell you what I remember from conversations from being on VIP, and what the plan would have been years ago. And without really knowing the details of the technical details of how.com is implemented this today, but I know that this is still on the WordPress.com infrastructure. It's not like they're using Pressable behind the scenes or anything weird like that. It's still a WordPress.com website, on the same thing that everyone else uses for WordPress.com. But one of the things, like I don't think I'm telling tales out of school or anything, but one of the things that Barry Abrahamson, who's kind of sort of the original systems architect for .com and most of .org still, has with VIP specifically, or custom database tables or this or that, it's never really been a technical limitation to run custom plugins on WordPress.com or have custom database tables on WordPress.com. Supporting those things isn't really technically that challenging or difficult, as much as it is a human problem and implementation details of supporting it and easing people into the idea of what plugins look like on WordPress.com for their own happiness engineers and their support staff, instead of just having to be familiar with WordPress.com and Automatic's offerings as a company. Once you start letting people activate any plugin that they want,
that perspective,
anything on the platform, suddenly their support team has to support 50,000 plugins that they may or may not be familiar with. So,
good point.
So the two things that I think are going to be the hot topics when it comes to having plugins activated on WordPress.com are going to be, yes, the confusion between .com and .org, like you mentioned, but more specifically, what users' experience is for a WordPress.com user that could get lost in the shuffle between Calypso and Jetpack and transitioning and moving their data and those kind of things. I think there's a lot of potential for fallout where things just aren't going to work the way that they're supposed to, because plugins aren't designed for that type of thing. But secondly is the same way that themes, for a really long time, companies like Array Themes and Theme Foundry and those guys, where they've got lots of themes where they can put themes for sale on WordPress.com and have a strategic relationship for whatever it looks like to make their pennies on the dollar for the sales of these themes on WordPress.com. This starts to be a potential add-on, upgrade, funnel, relationship, support, contract looking thing for plugin developers that want to have a relationship with Automatic or their users across WordPress.com to support plugins like EDD or Give or BBPress or whatever else. So if it comes to be where suddenly Give WP gets activated on 50,000, 100,000 WordPress.com sites, it would only start to make sense that Automatic would want to say, hey guys, this is yours, and you guys are the pros with this, and we've got this many users that are active on our platform. Can you help us help them better? And so it's easy to look at it and say, well, maybe they're going to take something away from another hosting company or self-hosted installs. You're cannibalizing the user base, whatever else. But I really don't think that is going to be the case, as much as this is just a big, awesome opportunity for people to buddy up with Automatic and try and build the best awesome that they can. So, well,
they already have kind of a similar system with their when they sort of open up the theme directory on WordPress.com to third-party theme authors, where you can establish a relationship. And there's at least one or two, or at least a few people I know who make the bulk of their income just by theme sales on WordPress.com.
Yep, exactly right. And if the same or similar can happen for plugin authors, as a starving plugin author myself, I think it's wonderful. I think it's great.
Wow, you raised such a great point with the support infrastructure. It's like, boy, I'm just sitting here thinking about that, the scale, or which direction do you go? Do you continue to do what you've done all along and forward people to the plugin author's website or their support forums and say that you can support that? But well, then if you're not going to support it, why do you allow us to run it on your systems? So, there's that question. And yeah, I mean, maybe you establish some sort of partnerships, or I don't know if there's financials involved, but I guess maybe these plugin companies would experience growth. They'd have to hire on more staff, support people, and then they would just assign them to the, I don't know, WordPress.com support forms for plugins. I don't even know how that whole infrastructure would work. So
possibly, yeah.
It's crazy to think about it.
Yep, it really is a super exciting feature for them to be rolling out. And Automatic's happiness team has grown exponentially now that they're over a 550 headcount, I think, for total automaticians. That they have real-time chat now. Their support team's insane. They've always done. I have firsthand seen the absolutely insane amount of support. I don't want to call it burden, but the number of requests that happiness engineer chugs through on a daily basis at Automatic is crazy. And I don't know if Automatic still does it, but you used to do a support rotation as like your first 2 weeks when you were a new hire at the company.
It's still a thing.
Oh gosh, I was miserable at that. Like, it was really truly an insane amount of work and communication and follow up and juggling 25 issues at a time while stuff is coming in. I mean, they are super hard workers that deserve all the kudos that they can get. And so it doesn't surprise me that they're trying to roll this out for business customers only and roll it out pretty slowly and methodically, because these folks are they're already doing an incredible job as it is. So to add additional workload, you got to do that slow. You got to treat people right. So it's cool to see.
Again, it will be interesting to see how this all shakes out and how the infrastructure around it, how they structure it. So that's going to do it for this week's edition of WordPress Weekly. I thought it was going to be 20 minutes. Hey, you get the masters on the show here. We could go on for days, for hours. We've done this before. You can find show notes for this episode and all previous episodes on wptavern.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jeffro, JEFFR0. And I like this. I like bouncing ideas. I like your perspective on things. I think you may be the new co-host. This is your tryout. I hope you noticed.
Now you are officially on the record for having offered me that slot. So I guess we'll see what happens next week, huh?
You may have been promoted from friend of the show to co-host. I guess that's the way it works.
Well, it's nice to see that there is some sort of a graduation plan for people. And so when I retire, there'll be a friend of the show that'll take over for me, and it gives people hope that they can move up into bigger and better things.
Yeah, it might make people want to be on the show more. Who knows? Who knows? So if people want to get in touch with you, follow you, how can they do this, sir?
I'm at JJJ on Twitter and GitHub if you're curious about the things I'm working on. JJJ.blog if you care about some of the things that I'm working on WordPress wise, and yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. BuddyPress and bbpress.org if you're interested in sort of my favorite plugins and the hits. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Man, it'd be kind of nice to have you as a co-host. Then you can, anytime, at least once a week, I could ping you about the BBs. So you can't get away from me. That's wonderful.
Are they done yet?
Yeah, every Wednesday. That's how I'll start the show. So everybody, I want you to enjoy this 3-day weekend. Stay safe out there. This is kind of the official start to summer, one of my favorite times of the year. I'm especially looking forward to the 3-day weekend.
Me too.
We'll talk to you again next Wednesday afternoon. Until then, so long, everybody.